Yo, what's going on? We got every artist has a flop era by Honest. Now, this is true. This is true. Everyone has their downtimes, everyone has their depressive episodes. And that's just the same thing with artistry in the music industry. Everyone has their flop moments, flop eras. It's normal. It's imperfect. It's
Flop era, that dreaded chapter in every artist's career where the albums don't chart well, the singles miss, the vibes are off, and the fans start to panic like it's the end of the world. But here's the twist. A flop era isn't always a failure. In fact, I'd argue it's the most important era an artist can have. So let's unpack this, because every artist has a flop era, and that can very much be a good thing. First, let's kill the automatic stigma. Flop sounds like such a harsh word, right? Like it automatically equals irrelevance, embarrassment, or that an artist is done for good.
True.
But that's not how it always works. Obviously, it can mean those things, but that's not always the case. A flop era isn't always about quality, it's also about reception. It's that moment where the audience doesn't connect the way they used to. The sound doesn't land, the look isn't giving, the energy is mismatched. But in some instances, what's really happening in the background is evolution, growth, risk. Because let's be honest, no artist stays on top forever, and the ones who try to usually end up making the same song 15 times over until we stop noticing altogether. Let's start with one of the biggest names in pop history, Lady Gaga. After the domination of the Fame Monster, and Born This Way, Gaga had the world in a chokehold. But then came Art Pop, an album that at the time was dragged by critics, discarded by the public, and even disowned by Gaga herself for a while. People said it was too weird, too chaotic, too disjointed. Sales dipped. Headlines used the word flop like it was gospel. Some of Gaga's weird creative choices also didn't help with this era, from being puked on stage to her R. Kelly collaboration. But fast forward a few years,
what the
Art
fuck?
Pop has been reclaimed, resurrected, rebranded as ahead of its time. I'm aware that the ahead of its time sentiment has been heavily echoed around Art Pop for quite a bit, but I don't think Art Pop was ahead of its time. In fact, I think it was a little late. By the time it came out, pop was moving away from the maximalist sound and into minimalism. What I can say is, I think Art Pop is a good record that had a lot of forward-thinking ideas that were never materialized, and it has some of Gaga's best and career-defining work. And more importantly, it gave Gaga the space to reset, to shake off the pressure of being the perfect pop star, and go explore other lanes like jazz, film, and eventually chromatic mayhem. A full circle moment that paid tribute to her older sounds. All things that wouldn't have happened without the so-called flop era. Or take Beyonce, because yes, even Queen Bee had her version of it. After I Am Sasha Fierce, which had mega hits like Single Ladies and Halo, there was 4. Now don't get me wrong, 4 is beloved now, and even had fans at the time of its release. But when it first dropped, it was weirdly muted compared to Beyonce's previous album.
Really?
No massive radio hit, no cultural explosion, people were confused. Run the World didn't perform like her other lead singles, but behind the scenes, she was freeing herself from the pressure of chasing hits and embracing artistry. Songs like
Round the World wasn't a hit?
Run the World didn't perform like her other lead singles, but
really? That song is like huge now, no? Like just huge in general now. I thought that was like a huge hit, no?
Behind the scenes, she was freeing herself from the pressure of chasing hits and embracing artistry. Songs like I Care, Love on Top, Countdown were her saying, I'm gonna do me for once. And you know what came right after that? The self-titled visual album dropped that broke the internet. The flop era was a setup, a necessary pit stop on the way to artistic revolution. And it worked out well for Beyonce, because ever since then, she has rebranded as an albums artist entirely. Singles are not her bread and butter. She makes a statement with an album, and it usually causes a lot of cultural conversations. Britney Spears' 2007 album is now often regarded as her best work. It came out at a tumultuous period in her life, involving paparazzi, relationships, mental health, and substances. Blackout came out as a dark and radical turn for Britney, something like she's never done before. The album—
Wait, no, that paparazzi guy is actually like shameless, bro. Like, oh shit, she fucking hit the car. Oh shit, I gotta take a picture of this. Like, goddamn, bro. How like shameless are you, man?
Dark and
look at this guy. He's like, oh shit. Like, bro, chill out, bro. Like, my god, like, she fucking like put like a 1-inch dent in the car, bro.
Something like she's
Chill
never
out,
done
bro.
before. The album didn't sell as well as her previous records and was shrugged off by critics and criticized for its heavy use of autotune, her lack of songwriting, and even the album cover. Retrospective reviews of the album have been much kinder.
That
and hailed it
cover
as a
is
pop
low-key ass, I can't
masterpiece
lie.
that redefined an era of pop music and influenced acts like Lady Gaga and Charli XCX. Another example would be the infamous Kanye West and his record 808s and Heartbreak. The man went from the soul sample college dropout energy to auto-tuned emotional minimalism. People hated it and even dismissed it as an expression within hip-hop. Unfortunately, Kanye West was an influential figure, so that so-called flop birthed an entire generation. The influence can be heavily seen
True.
and heard in the work of Drake, Kid Cudi, and The Weeknd. That album redefined what rap could be. It just took time for the world to catch up. That's the thing about flop eras. Sometimes they're not even flops at all. They're just too early, or too different, or too honest for the moment they land in. But if you give it time, it makes sense. The flop
True.
era can be where the artists stop chasing approval and start finding their truth. And yeah, it's messy, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, but so are most transformations. Even Taylor Swift, who's basically the music industry's valedictorian, had a little stumble. After the massive success of 1989, her album Reputation was polarizing. Some fans loved it, others didn't. I fall somewhere in the middle personally. But Reputation wasn't explicitly about hits, it was about reclaiming a narrative. It was her rebuilding phase, and look at her now, Folklore, Evermore, and the All-Timer Eras Tour. She's thriving, but she had to go through Reputation to get to that.
Right.
I think there are also albums victims of smear campaigns and persisting narratives, which ultimately overtake the album cycle. This happened to Christina Aguilera in 2010 with her album Bionic. Perez Hilton admitted to running negative stories about Christina. Perez, who was a close friend of Lady Gaga during this album cycle, ran various stories painting Christina Aguilera as a Lady Gaga copycat.
Damn.
Perez later claimed that Gaga encouraged him to run the negative stories. If that were to be true, we could say art pop came back to bite her quick. But regardless of all the mess that surrounded this album, the Gaga copycat allegations were so overly exaggerated. The only commonality Bionic had with Gaga is Madonna's influence. The album sounds nothing like Gaga. The lead single Not Myself Tonight rides the electro pop wave, but I wouldn't say it sounds like a Gaga song in the slightest. The Bionic album isn't perfect, but I think it has a lot of ambitious work by Christina, and a good amount of career highlights, from the underrated bonus track Birds of Prey to ballads like You Lost Me and Lift Me Up. There's a fair amount of gems on this record. We could also talk about the top group to solo artist pipeline. It can be extremely hard to navigate the world as a solo artist after you've been in a group your entire career. But sometimes those flops are just experiments that needed to happen. You have to swing and miss to know where your sweet spot is. Sometimes we do call things a flop.
Bro, her whole
instead of
career
letting
has
it
been a
breathe.
flop. What?
But here's the truth. If you really ride for an artist, you gotta ride through the weird albums sometimes, the messy eras, the aesthetic experiments that didn't land, because those are the building blocks for the comeback. You don't have to like every song and album by an artist. I for one certainly don't, but at the same time, being different doesn't always mean it's bad. Sometimes it takes a minute to adjust. And speaking of comebacks, and a lot of times that's when the classics are born. Even underground and indie artists go through it. You think just because they're not mainstream they don't flop? Sometimes they switch up their sound, lose half their fan base, and spend 2 years in the wilderness figuring it out. But that era of confusion, that's essential. That's how you end up with the breakthrough projects. That's how you turn niche into legacy. And let's be honest, life itself is a flop era sometimes. We all go through chapters where nothing's clicking, the vibe is
That's
off,
what I
the
said.
vision is blurry, but that doesn't mean we're done. It just means something is shifting. The same way artists need to fall off to find new ground, sometimes so do we. And maybe that's why flop eras
Who is
resonate
this?
so much, because they're human.
Who is
They
that
remind us
person?
Greatness isn't a straight line. It's full of stumbles, resets, and redemptions. And I think that's why people also tend to try to find redemption in a flop, even some that don't deserve it. Because there are flops that are just
Okay, why
purely
does he keep
flops,
using this song? This song is like not like really
with absolutely no redemption arc. So while I think having a flop era is really par for the course for every popular artist,
He just ran out of footage. He's
unless
like,
you're
fuck it, I'm
someone
gonna put
like Rihanna.
that song.
And I also believe that flops can lead to great things or even be recontextualized with time. There are also many instances of a flop just being a flop, a bad album, a bad career move. I feel like present day there's a redemption arc given to every album that doesn't do well. But not every album is ahead of its time.
What is on
and
my
not
screen
every
right now?
album deserves redemption. But once again, on the flip side, there are many great flop albums and flop eras. Maybe they're just growth in disguise. Maybe they're the moment the mask comes off, the formula gets thrown out, and the real artistry begins. Sometimes a flop era is where the good shit starts.
Yeah, I mean, he made pretty good points, man. Like, some flop eras could be revolutionary. Some of them could be the death of a career. You never know, man. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Go subscribe to Honest. And, yeah, thanks for watching. Goodbye.